This story was sent to us from Taylor in Seattle. A few years ago, while still living with my parents, a new neighbor moved on our street. He moved in about 4 houses down with his mother, who we will call Mary. Mary was an older woman who had been living in the neighborhood for a long time. She lived in the neighborhood before my family moved in more than 20 years before. She always lived alone as far as I remember. We didn't know she had any children, and she never spoke about having a son. We later found out from another neighbor that he was her son that she had given up for adoption 40 years before. I saw him outside mostly on weekend mowing the lawn. On the weekdays, I almost never saw him. On the few occasions when we saw each other, he would always look at me in a strange way which creeped me out. I would always wave at him, and he wouldn't wave back. Some of the other neighbors thought he was strange too. Before he moved in, his mom would always socialize with the other neighbors. Once he moved in, we almost never saw her. I remember my mom would always go over and bring her food at least once a week. One day, my mom decided to stop by Mary's house since she hadn't seen her in a few weeks. I decided to go with my mom because I didn't trust the situation. We walked up to the front door and, before we could ring the doorbell, her son answered the door. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yes, we are just stopping by to check on Mary. We are your neighbors," my mom told him. "Yes, she is fine. Thank you for checking," he said before slamming the door in our faces. We went back to our house and told my father about what happened. He was so angry and wanted to confront Mary's son, but my mom talked him out of it. The next day, my mom called Mary's house phone, which no one answered. We were beginning to worry a bit. My mom suddenly remembered that Mary had a niece who lived in Spokane and visited her once a year. She called Mary's niece, who answered the phone almost immediately. My mom explained to Mary's niece that we went to visit Mary and her son wouldn't let us see her and that we haven't seen her outside since he moved in. We were so shocked when her niece said, "Aunt Mary doesn't have a son." The call with Mary's niece ended quickly, and shortly after the police arrived. The man who was supposedly Mary's son was walking out of her house with handcuffs while Mary was transported by an ambulance. A few days later, Mary's niece called my mother with an update. The man who was posing as Mary's son was actually a scammer. Mary had been the victim of a phone scam, and she had been sending this guy her money. She also began trusting him, and once he learned that she lived alone, he showed up at her door one day. He had been forging her checks and had stolen more than $10,000 from her accounts. He was even in the process of having her sign her house over to him. He was drugging her with sleeping pills and alcohol shots so she would be disorientated. He locked her in the house and wouldn't allow her outside to socialize with any of the neighbors. I still can't believe that something like this happened in my neighborhood in front of us all. Mary never returned to her home and ended up moving in with her niece in Spokane. If anyone out there has elderly neighbors who live alone, please check on them. Stay spooked.